Okay, so this unit is kind of fluctuates between using TI and Desmos. I am still going to show you both, and you can choose your preference. Yesterday's, of course, when we did correlation coefficient, I feel like Desmos is the most user-friendly, less buttons to remember, but again, if that's your preference, then please do. Otherwise, TI just requires some calculator buttons, but it's easier with just with the handheld to get faster, I guess, than typing it in, where Desmos may take a little bit of time, and there's just more buttons to remember. Now, today we are talking about a lesson that you also learned last year in 8th grade, and honestly is the same thing, something called direct variation. Now, direct variation goes with something called proportionality. Last year you learned something called proportional versus non-proportional, but then direct variation is finding values that make them proportional. So for instance, just vocabulary purposes, in a direct variation problem, you'll see words like y varies directly with x. Since it is proportional, when we see a table of values, we're looking for k, which is the constant of variation or constant of proportionality. Again, we'll talk about these. And then when I'm solving for a missing value, we set up a proportion and we cross multiply. So some of this will look familiar. For the left side of these notes, I'm going to use TIs, and then for the right side of the notes, I'm going to use Desmos. Again, you can use your preference. So for instance, number 1, okay, or I guess I'm going to go back and forth, honestly, just to show you. But anytime we're given a table, I'm going to type into stat in my TIs. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 4, 8, 12, 16. Now this has nothing to do with what we did yesterday, where we're looking for the correlation coefficient. So we're not going to turn on our diagnostic, even though you do need to remember how to do that. What we're going to do is do stat calc 4, enter, enter, enter. Now what you'll notice is the first thing is the relationship between the values show a direct variation? How I know is if it's proportional, and proportional means that the y-intercept is 0. Since the b value is 0, it is proportional, so the answer is yes. And then if I'm asking for the constant of variation, that would be y equals 4x. Think of it like slope-intercept form, where the constant of variation k is equal to 4. If I did the same thing for this one, stat edit, I would do 1, 3, 5, 7, and then my y values would be 5, 11, 17, and 23. If I did the same stat regression, linear regression, this time I know it's not direct variation because the y-intercept is not 0, and the equation would be y equals 3x plus 2. But I wouldn't have a constant of variation because it's not proportional. So it would just be no in that case. Now to show you the equivalent on Desmos, again, something that we've kind of talked about here and there, is you know how to type in a table into Desmos? What you do is you hit the plus button and then add a table, same thing as stat, and then you're going to type your values in. Always be careful because it defaults a number below the one before, so if you don't need it, make sure you backspace. And then to do regression on Desmos, you're going to hit the scatter plot regression button right there, and I get the same thing. Now what Desmos does is they put a y-intercept plus 0, which you wouldn't, and so y equals 4x, which means I do know it's direct variation because it equals 0, and that's it. So then going back to TIs, so you're going to have those types of questions where it asks you whether it's proportional or not, and then what the constant of variation would be. Then you have number 3, if y varies directly with x and y is equal to 6 when x equals 5, find the constant of variation and y when x equals 10. So this one has 2 parts. The first part is the constant of variation, also known as slope in a way, but in this case it would just be y over x. That's what k would be. And so if it's y over x and they gave me y is 6 and x is 5, then I would just type that in as a fraction and see if it simplifies, which it doesn't. So my constant of variation is 6/5. But then they want me to take it a step further and find y when x equals 10. So if x equals 10 and I'm setting up a proportion, 10 goes in the denominator with 5 because those are both x values, and I'm trying to determine what the y value would be. Well, if you know this from 6th and maybe in 8th grade a little bit, you're going to cross multiply, which means 6 times 10 and then divide by 5. Which you can let your calculator do all that. And so the missing y value would be 12. And I've seen situations where it's going to ask you to do both of those, the constant of variation and the missing value. Let's do another one of those. So if y varies directly with x and y is 5 over 2 and x is 15. So this one's a little wonky because you're going to have to do 5 over 2 over 15, or if you know 5 over 2 is equivalent to 2.5. So I could convert it to a decimal. And so 2.5 divided by 15 would give me a constant of variation of a repeating decimal, 0.16 repeating, which if I change that to a fraction would just be 1/6. And that's my constant of variation. Now that's also going to help me find my missing value. Find y when x is 3. So if x is 3, I'm going to put that in the denominator and I'm going to cross multiply. So I would do 2.5 times 3 divided by 15. And so my y value would be 0.5. Now the way to check my answer is if I plug 0.5 divided by 3 back in here, notice I get the same decimal. So that's a way to check. Let's do another one. If y varies directly with x and y is 21 when x is 7, so my y over x, y is 21 and x is 7, then I'm going to simplify that. So 21 over 7 is equivalent to 3. And that's my constant of variation. With that, if they want me to find x when y is 27. So this time if y is 27, 27 needs to be in the numerator, and we're finding the x value this time. So I'm gonna do 27 times 7 divide by 21. So my missing x value would be 9. So it's just cross multiplication there. If I tried Desmos, which is not wrong, but again, it's just a preference thing. I'm gonna show you how it can do calculations. To me, it's like not worth it. You can honestly just type this into your TIs for faster functions, I guess. So number 4 says if y varies directly with x and x is 3, gotta point that out to you. It says x is 3 and y is 14. What you have to be careful with is make sure you always put y over x. So y would be 14 and 3 would be x. So then I'm gonna type that in. And this is where Desmos can do the same thing. If I just type in 14 over 3 with the hash, it turns it into a fraction automatically. And then it gives me the decimal equivalent as well. So, and if I want to change that decimal to a fraction, I can click this fraction icon so it's a little quicker, or if I can turn it off. So it's either 4.6 repeating or it's just equivalent to 14 over 3. Now what it doesn't do, of course, is solve your proportion for you. So you're gonna have to set it up. If 14 over 3 is y over x, what is y when x is 6? So 6 would go in the denominator and then y would go on top. Now what you could do in Desmos is basic computation, but you would have to do 14. To do the times button is either use this keyboard here at the bottom and do times, which is right there, a little tedious, or on your actual keyboard in front of you, it would be a Shift 8. Shift 8 is how you get that multiplication dot. You can't use X. X is not multiplication, so you have to make sure to use the Shift dot, or Shift 8, if you will. So anyway, 14 times 6, and then you would divide your answer, 84, divided by 3. And so you get 28 as your answer for the y value. Okay, to do that again. Next one, if y varies directly with x and y is 15 while x is 6, I'm going to put 15 over 6 because it's y over x. And then find the constant of variation. So again, if I want to use Desmos, it would just be 15 divided by 6, which would be 2.5. If I wanted to find the fraction equivalent, I would just hit the fraction icon, which would be 3 over 2 simplified. And then for my cross multiplication, it would be 15 over 6. Since y is 44, 44 would need to go in the numerator for y. And then I would multiply 44 times 6 and then divide by 15. Now, if you try to do it all in one step, you do division, it automatically does a fraction, so you can't do that on Desmos. Versus if I did it in my calculator, I could. So I'm gonna do 264 divided by 15, and I get, 17.6. And then if I wanted to change that to a fraction, of course, just hit the fraction icon. So, I feel like it doesn't like me. There we go, 88 over 5, which is the equivalent. All right, to do one more in TI 84, just to show you, if y varies directly with x when x is 3/4 and y is 15, so that's where you have to be careful. The 15 would actually go in the numerator, where 3/4 would go in the denominator. The cool part about TI, and I think you could do the same thing in Desmos, which I'll see, is I could actually do 15 over another fraction 3/4. So if you see how I type that in, 15 over 3/4, you can actually, sorry, it's blurry, maybe. Sorry. So it can be 15 over 3/4 and it will give me that, or I can just do 15 over 0.75, which is the decimal equivalent of 3/4, and still get 20. But then to find my y, my x when y is 25, I would have to do 25 times 0.75. And the nice part about TIs is you can go ahead and divide by 15 in the same problem and it'll give me the roundabout answer, versus having to separate it in Desmos. And if I wanted to do a fraction, math 1 would be equal to 5/4. So both ways are perfect. Just some other ways you could see your questions, of course, like number 9, if y is directly proportional, which is another way they'll say varies directly, y is 3.2 and x is 1.6, so it'd be 3.2 over 1.6. I can type that in as a fraction, and it would be 2, which would be my constant of proportionality. And then x is 19. What would y be? Which means 19 needs to go in the denominator. 3.2 times 19 divided by 1.6, and I would get a value of 38. Another way you could see it is in word problems. So Barbara's income varies directly with the number of hours she works. Barbara makes $192 in 16 hours. So 192 is dollars and 16 is hours. How much would Barbara make if she worked 30 hours? So 30 would be in my denominator, and then I would multiply 192 times 30 and divide by 16. So it would be $360 that she would make for $30. So you could see it in word problems as well.